Hello.
Hi, Frode.
Forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks.
Huh?
I look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks.
Likewise.
It'll be fun.
We will have a good time. How
Just,
long are you thinking of staying? I know you have to go up to Vancouver, and Dene said your
yeah,
family with.
yeah, it depends. Well, once the whole thing with Sloan is settled, then Deanie's team is going to help get some tickets. So I expect maybe 3 days on either side, 3 days with you in the Bay, and then a little bit in Berkeley afterwards, or something like that.
There's no problem. You can stay as long as you like.
Thank you very much. That'll be good.
The timing works out actually well.
Oh, okay. So how was it last week with Dene? You went through a lot of fun things, I understand.
Busy. Definitely busy.
Yeah, busy is good.
Yeah, no, it looks good. It's a college project. So short of having a 15 million or $20 million budget, uh, it's very creditable.
Yeah, budgets are a thing. It's interesting, I think, when it comes to technology, what's almost free and what's almost impossible to do.
Uh-huh.
It varies so much. I talk to my programmers and various things. It's like, oh, can you do this thing? Oh, then we have to redo the whole project. Oh, okay. Well, what about this piece of magic over here then? Can you do that someday? Hang on, done. Very,
Yeah.
very
Yep.
difficult.
That was the way working with programmers was.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you, do you live in Southampton per chance?
No, I live in Wimbledon,
Oh,
Southampton. I go there on a regular basis. Why? What are you thinking about?
I'm going to be passing through Southampton in May.
Oh,
So I
okay.
wondered if you were there, but it's all right.
It's not very far away, so we're definitely able to come down.
Well, we'll give it some consideration.
Yeah, would be good.
We're basically just passing through, but on the way to Paris. But there are no firm plans. So,
But why Southampton? Why are you passing through there? Are you doing a boat?
well, that's where the boat goes.
Yeah, that's cool. Hello, Adam. Adam is fully here with massive laptop.
Yes, it looks like a giant laptop.
Yes. Hello, Bob.
Hello.
Hey, Deanie.
I'm gonna
Hi,
get my
Dee.
coffee. Let me go grab my coffee. I'll be right back.
I have some here.
Yeah, I got some here too, actually. Happy to share. Hello, Fabien.
Hello, hello.
Fabien, Alan, Bob.
Oh no, we lost Alan already. Oh, that's just, oh no, there he is. Thought that was a bit quick.
Switching monitors. Ah,
So, hang on. Oh, you
Hey,
said,
Bob, thank you for sharing that article. I read through it yesterday on the plane, and I have a lot of comments about it. So I thought I'd respond to you because I've been, I'm a humanities person and studying the history of book and media. And so I have a lot of responses about what humanities people have said about text and writing and reading. And I think that would be useful to bring all that together a little bit. So I'll respond to you.
so,
which,
sorry. Oh, I think Deanie is talking about a, book on, excuse me, an article on why is it difficult to read on screens.
Mhm.
It comes
Yes.
out it comes up every once in a while, and it's definitely a provocation worth addressing. And it's directly related to today. So I was lucky enough to have a few minutes with Fabien this weekend, and we decided on something that I'm going to change. Oh yeah, he smiles. Good. A couple of interesting things. So first of all, part of the time now should obviously continue with the dialogue we've had for a while, free-flowing dialogue. But of course, some of it should be more project management oriented. What are we doing and all of that good stuff. Hi, Michael. So the suggestion is that we should split this session. The second half of the session should be project management, the first half general. However, Dene can only do the first session because she has this thing called a job. So particularly today, and I mean later on, we may very well decide that we keep 2 hours today normal, and then we do more project management, coding, planning on a different day. But I do think that because Dene is here now, we should think a little bit in terms of the whole project management mess. And on that, I want to open the floor. I only have two really strong priorities. Number one, yeah, okay, Dene, you go.
Well, I have a lab, I run a lab, right? And my lab has a standing meeting every Monday at 10 o'clock. And then I have, stuff after that, but I'd like to be in person in my own lab. So that's why I leave at 9:30, right, to get there. And then secondly, in terms of project management, we talked about this the last time we met, that we could divide our time between the kind of theory-based discussions we're having and the project-based, which is the project that we're doing. And so we don't have to do it both on the same days, right, Frode?
No, absolutely. There's no question about that. But even within the kind of theory general discussion, I see Peter just joined us and Leon. I'll just wait till Leon is connected with audio. Hello, Leon. Hello, Peter.
Good morning.
So we're just talking now about the basic thing of splitting our time between general discussions and more project management discussions. We're going to look into splitting this time 1 hour in each, but also most likely we're going to have another day dedicated to more project management discussions. At least Dene and I and her team will, and we will try to find a way to make it for whoever of you guys want to be there that you can. So, okay, I see Alan is writing up a lot here in the chat, and I'm going to give the mic to you in a second, Alan, but my priority is just twofold, and this is really important. Number one has to be user data. That doesn't necessarily mean PDF, doesn't necessarily mean document. It could mean metadata for documents, including entities and documents, at least initially. And the most important thing is I will be very, very stressed if we go into the next month, next year, without at least having a strong strategy for how to synchronize or go from a computer to a headset. I have
what?
to go from a computer to a headset with our data.
Oh,
I think this could be a real time suck, energy suck for all of us. So one thing I've written and put in our Twitter group that not all of you have seen, I'm totally happy if we, for example, decide that in the beginning we use HTML as the data store. We still need at some point to get a PDF into the library. Of course we do. But if it's easier to manipulate in that format, a lot of it can be extracted. We can have our own dialogue. We should do so. So I really want to hear, before I give to you, Alan, because what you have is quite in-depth there. I really want to hear if anyone has any comments on the thinking of how we should sync into the headset. There has been thoughts of having it, you have to have the computer with you. So it's a local thing, so you don't even have the internet. I am happy with that for this stage. And from our Twitter discussions, I think maybe Fabien, you go first with your current thoughts, because I know you got them.
Sure. Well, I have a bit more than thoughts. I have some prototype where I think it's like, I want to say the minimum set in order to have, let's say, files somewhere, and being able to manipulate them, and then that the result of the manipulation is saved back on the server. So let's say you have a document, say a book or a representation of that book, and it's initially there in that position. And if you virtually grab it and you move it there, when you come back, it's still there. So that's, I would argue, that's like the bare minimum. And then once we have some kind of agreement on doing this, then we can build whatever we want, however crazy we want. So yeah, I shared it on Twitter. I can go a bit into how it's implemented, but I would argue it's not complex, and that's the point. So it has to be, again, the minimum set. So you have a URL and you say, here is the new data, store it somewhere. You have another URL, which is give me the data, all of it. Or another that say, I want just, for example, the last save. So that, for example, the book is here. I would argue that's the bare minimum. I know that there are a lot of discussion about how to make it live or interactive, which I think might be interesting when you do onboarding. Namely, if somebody starts to use the system, because it's new, they don't know how to use it. So I added I don't want to add stuff, but I think I would argue like being able to do live and see that, oh, the user did take something and move it there. We moved something, like did anything at all. It is usable information, so that if nothing moves at all after, let's say, a minute, maybe the user doesn't get it and some help need to happen. So yeah, I've made a arguably simple thing on glitch, and why I think it's just a proposal, and it's on that platform because it allows to be remixed. So if somebody here today say, oh, I don't like it and I want to change it, but I don't know, I don't want to touch backend or have my own server or whatever, glitch take care of all this kind of things, it's a less sexy part, arguable. And to address Frode's point, and also discussion with Alan about being offline first for privacy or tinkerability and whatnot, glitch also has a download everything project option, so that if you say, oh, it's a horrible service, so I don't like it for whatever reason, there is absolutely no tie. You don't need to use it. It just to facilitate, let's say, kickstarting the process. Yeah.
Tell us what glitch is. I looked it up and it looked like a mistake.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's the real definition, but I couldn't easily.
How about we get into that in hour 2? I mean, like, is that all right? Like, a lot of us are familiar with glitch, and we can dive into it. I'd love to see a demo, but I'd love to cover some.
Well, I just want to know what glitch is. I'm not asking for a long technical description now, but is it an open source programming environment, or what actually is it?
In one sentence, it's a website to make other websites.
There we go.
Okay, yeah, that's good. Yeah, the thing is, Alan, the project management discussion today will be in the first hour, because Dene's presence is really important at this point, more than even later. So, you know, we definitely should go to wider things, but, you know, in terms of building off each other here, we really
can we just say that we agree with you on this and go on? I agree. I agree that we should do project management first.
Okay.
That we don't need to explain it any further, but let's go on with it.
Yeah.
I don't want to miss theory, though. I'm a theory person. I'm not just a project manager. Could we have 30 minutes of, I mean, I'm here for an hour and a half. So let's do an hour of theory and 30 minutes of project management. And then you guys go back to theory, something like that.
Can I throw my hat in the ring here?
I'm not just technical.
I'd love that. And I think just the nature of these conversations is that they flow, you know, we don't really stick to hard and fast rules for very long. But with you here and with the project not being started yet, right? So we still have time to actually think about how we're going to think about it. This seems like this would be a good time to just do the very slightest, that not actually, what I'm proposing is that we don't actually even spend this time solving the problems, right? But the list that I put in there is like one very naive attempt at saying, here are some themes and areas. And after we do that through, like after Frode does that, and we, you know, Adam does a version, like we kind of collect those, do a Bob Horn like map, you know, and then we get to see areas that are of particular interest to us, but areas that also need attention. You know how this stuff goes, right? This is just how we make products, right? So I'm all for whatever, but I definitely would love you to be a part of that kind of how do we get our minds around the whole project, even the parts that seem very boring, and then from there kind of figure out what is, like Fabien did, the MVP of that part. And yeah, so
Alan, could
for
you
this
go
call, I'd
back
like to get go ahead.
that nice entry you put in the chat? Can you go through that with us and talk through it a little bit? I mean, I'm trying. I mean, I'm
sure.
trying to multitask. I'm listening to what you're saying, everybody, and this is showing up in the chat. So I don't want to split my attention. Right? This is what Bob is talking about in the article. So can you present this to us, and then we can talk about it?
Absolutely. Frode, did you have anything else? I just wanted to say that.
Well, I did actually, and the thing is, well, there's kind of a false dichotomy, to use that phrase, of theory versus implementation. That's not how I see it. How I see it is, no matter what interactions we want to do in XR, we got to get the data in there some way. And at this point, it really stresses me out to a high degree that we have absolutely no clue. So that means that all these really great ideas that you've written down here, Alan, is really talking about clouds in the sky and things like this.
Nope, it's not. So let me review, and I'll go into why my intention for it is different than clouds in the sky. The intention is actually my attempt to be as pragmatic as possible for each step in the process, right? I'm trying to be as bare bones so we could say, okay, this part of the experience is where offline comes in, right? This part is where interface comes in. And I'm trying to kind of like not get anywhere close to pie in the sky. I'm sure I got it wrong.
Without further ado, please go ahead.
What's that, say again?
Without further ado about why you want to present it, please go ahead.
Okay, well, this Dene, this came out of a kind of a legacy tweet thread group, DM group that we have on Twitter that we will one day move off of and be more inclusive, but I don't think we can add other people to the thread, so it's stuck. And so this was really just kind of improv. This wasn't meant to be like, here's all my thoughts about the world. But and I know you guys have all thought about it. Folks have all thought about it longer than I have in this case. So this was just throwing a hat in the ring, starting backwards and saying, if I'm in XR, the assumption is there's going to be something having to do with the PDF that is somehow better than what I could do with a physical print PDF or looking at a screen of a PDF. So there's something that's happening there that is worth putting on the helmet. And so I just defined that as interacting, or comprehending the material in some way, right? Like I'm assuming that it's going to feel closer at hand with XR in some way, but I don't take any effort to try to define what that sort of interaction is.
Alan, are you talking about immediacy, like the sense of immediacy?
So this is exactly where this exercise is, useful, is that would be added on to this and probably even replace it. That's a description of, hey, when I'm in XR interacting with PDFs, I want it to feel immediate. I don't want there to feel latency. What I wrote, that's not even a requirement, right? But that's, as we discussed that part, we could be like, okay, you know what? It's way more important for it to be immediate than for me to say, like, I don't know, drag one document on top of another, right? And this is how we can make these choices in production to figure out, what an actual satisfying product is, right? Or experience. So immediacy definitely should go in that list. And as just a guess at this, a separate part of that, so the step back, I went backwards. So what I imagine the step number 2 going backwards is I want to synthesize other people's material with my own impressions. And that can be defined as a PDF is someone else's material. My impressions is a highlight, right? Trying to keep it as basic as possible.
Would that be like marginalia in a print-based environment?
Right. Or it could be like,
Scolia.
yeah. Or even just like if you stopped at page number 3, that could be counted as an impression of yours that you've left on the PDF, right? It doesn't have to be like a formulated thought or any kind of like complicated thing. I'm just trying to be really, without leading to any kind of conclusion, I'm trying to describe what the value is at each step of the way. And then that's up to the group to figure out what that, tactically means or redefine it, right? And I'm probably missing a lot of steps in here. So, and then part of that, I have the ability to restructure particles of content in a way that is more useful to me. That's more of like a stretch goal, but that's, I assumed other people have talked about that, so I threw it in there. Step number 3, again, going backwards, so maybe I should say -3, is I want to be able to easily capture various particles and compositions and export them out of XR into an external medium. Example, send to email. So that is roughly, I use broad words there because they could be PDFs, they could be articles, they could be highlights. That's up to the group to figure out what that scope is. But the point of story number 3 is I'm assuming when you're in XR reading this stuff, we want to be able to get it out of XR or some portion of it, right? So that's all that number 3 means. Story 4, in XR, I want to access a library of material and open one or more documents at a time, right? That's what we've been talking about. But even in what we have been talking about, and this is kind of what prompted me to write all this out, even what we were talking about, which seems like one thing, just getting data in and out, is actually like 4 stories in here, right? Because the other one is the next one, step -4. Oh, step -5, actually. In XR, I want a last state stored or in some way to remind me of what I was doing in my last session, which is what Fabien was just talking about in glitch. Yes, thank you, sir. And 6, I want to be able to add material into a library, right? So that's obvious. I want to make changes in XR to be stored in the library. Another way of stating that. And then 7 and 8 are like perhaps the same thing, perhaps different. It kind of just depends on the sympathies of the group. But one says, I want to be able to access XR without having to connect to external services, which I imply it took to mean like Apple lock-in, Meta lock-in, Netflix lock-in, I don't know. And then 8 is a little bit more extreme of that. I want to be able to access XR while being offline, right? And this is not a complete list, but this is the kind of thing that I would love to see written out as stories. So then we can sort of flesh it out and, then and get a sense of here's how far along we are on this part. Here are the different options for handling this part. That's my pitch.
That's very good. And what I was hoping we could do is make a list of what we wanted to see done and prioritize it. We have a scope that we have to follow, right? We have to deliver certain things, but within that scope, there are going to be, as I was talking to Peter about, items that we all are interested in seeing done. So those will be stretch goals, and we can prioritize those as well. So what can we deliver on time, for the grant? Yeah. What can we add to that once we get caught up and maybe ahead of what we said we're going to do? Because what happens too with these grants, as you all know, if you deliver what they want, they're happy. If you deliver what they want and show that you're going in specific directions with it and have done more, there's a chance of getting another grant with that organization. So it would be nice to be able to deliver what we're promising, but then show that we're all moving in different directions with a whole set of other activities. Then there could
I'd
be
love to add to that along with these stories is, the range of goals, right? Because there's that's a great new goal that I wasn't aware of, right? And perhaps the most important goal could be to get another grant, right?
Yeah.
Which changes the story from to test out a hypothesis of interaction, right?
Well, and to get a grant, so like I
Well-
got the Society of American Archivists grant, which was just a small little grant. But that grant gave me, I think, the credibility for this grant, because the Sloan this SAA grant was about metadata. So it shows that I'm already working in metadata, right? So now I'm working in visual meta, which is a kind of metadata, right? So all of the grants you get are stepping stones to the next grant. That's how you, when you look at someone's Vita and they've got like $10 million of the grants, that's because they started with one grant, built on the next several grants, and just continue building, right? That's how labs function. We can't function without grants. So, I propose that we, and I said this to Peter, we all look at what we have to do within the confines of our grant, and then each one of us think about where you want to head. There's individual grants for you to build out of this. And since you are advisors on this grant, I think we said board of directors. Is that what we said, Frode? Do we call it?
Future Text Lab, the board of directors is Vint, Ismail, and a few others.
Okay, so so you can say that your advisory committee on this grant, working with us to define these activities we're doing, that gives you the propulsion to write your own grants out of this. And then we can go back to Sloan and say, not only did we fulfill our promise to you, but we've got 4 people that have written grants elsewhere that have gotten grants out of this grant. That's the kind of vibrancy organizations want to see. One more thing I'll mention is that last year, in October last year, I went to Triangle SEI, which is funded by the Mellon Foundation. And that was a week-long retreat that I took my lab to, and we worked on the little metadata schema that we developed, right? That became ELMS 3.0. That gave us the impetus to write the SAA grant. That gave us the impetus to help with this grant. So it becomes this kind of system. And so I encourage all of you to think about what you want to do individually out of this project, and then help us make good on what we promised, because we all win by that. There's something for all of us in this grant, so to speak. And then I'm here to help any of you. If you've never written a grant before, I'm happy to help you.
Excellent. Thank you.
I think it would be helpful if someone would make a list out of Alan's communication, eliminating all the words like "I want to be able to," just a list of functions, or he calls goals, but just list them. You don't need to add a whole lot of literary stuff like "this is not a complete list." Of course it's not a complete list. You don't need to put that in. Just make a list.
Sure.
And then we can all look at it more easily. I'm asking this because I can't right now copy out
Yeah, I'm happy to put it somewhere, and I already actually have it at another location. That's another discussion, is where do we put the working through of these, when we get into more fine-grained detail than principles, right? Like we should have a place that is more feature friendly than document friendly. But thanks.
We can have a
Bob.
Basecamp
I'll
site.
do that.
I
setting
think
it-
we need a list of functions that we want to have happen. And as a beginning, as a start, how can we, even think about it without, and Alan has a bunch of good ones. He calls them goals. That's all right with me. I don't care. But, they are things that the system will do for me, which I call functions.
So we have Basecamp and Slack. Basecamp allows us to pick lists, and allows us to put documents, it allows us to put together calendars. And we've promised to the Sloan Foundation that we'll be using Basecamp and Slack. I'll be happy to set up a Slack account for all of us, so we can continue these conversations. We can archive in our Slack, because we have a paid educational Slack account. So, I mean, we kick in January. We're preparing now. So making these lists and developing these items will be great. And a GitHub repo is, we have to have one, right? It's necessary.
Peter?
Yes, do we have a formal registered domain name somewhere associated with the project? And I think we have to decide whether we want specifications and data to be out on the IPFS, or whether we want to refer all of the software agents to that one domain as being the canonical central point of trust from which people could download grammar specifications, libraries and different programming languages to interact with the specification. Various software products like that.
We have a domain, and that's the one that Frode has had for quite a while, the Future of Text. So we'll work off that. He's got a website. He's managing the site that he's had for quite a while. We're going to be building on what he's already done. We're not starting over. But what we're offering that's new are these project management tools, so we kind of bring us together. So we're using Zoom, but we also can Zoom right out of Slack, as you all know. And then in that Slack channel, we can have these conversations and they stay there. So right now, you know, for us to get to this chat that's here, we have to get the archive after it resolves after our meeting. Frode sends it to us, right? Then we can read it. At least in Slack, it stays there.
Okay. I'm not in love with Slack or any other proprietary system that owns our data at all. I mean, all our transcripts, all our text chats are on our website. It's uploaded, unless I have a bandwidth issue like last week, it's uploaded very, very quickly. So in terms of having our archive, you know, companies come and go. I'm not so sure about that, but my concern is with what we're doing right now. It does sound like a good idea, but we kind of have to. I put on our Twitter group an email, and I asked what you guys want to be called in this context. And for those of you who saw it, there was quite a range between, you know, badges. We don't need no stinking badges to refer to that movie, to the other one saying, yes, I definitely want something. So it also comes down to a little bit of commitment, because for all the years we've been doing this, when we asked to write a user story, it's never ever happened, not once. Right? So if there's a commitment now to doing it, that would be great. It's just that, you know, for the last year when we talked about this, it's been, what do you want to do in VR? You know, what are the stores? And it never materialized. And that is okay when we're doing the book, but when we're doing this now, you know, it's a very different thing. And of course, my role now is different from what it was a month ago. And it is good that we have some kind of a friction between us. You know, you guys want to go all kinds of thoughtful directions. That is absolutely brilliant. That's why we have community. For me, there's a few things that we just have to nail down. And one of the most basic things is, you know, Adam has been working on this quite a bit. How to get a PDF into XR and how to highlight text on it is actually not possible now, really. It's really hard. And the other thing is, we've had an interesting discussion over the years between HTML, PDF, and JSON to an extent, not the same things, of course. I think at this point, and I'm not trying to skip past the user stories at all, I think it's absolutely crucial we build them. I think we need to decide on a format to write this, because this will be part of our project / book. So what you wrote there, Alan, as I've said many times, and I know you'll agree with me, I would like to see that in a format that can go into our book. You know, that was Alan's initial questions. Pardon my French, just to be clear and loving to all of you, that is super fucking important. All right, very, very little here of early thoughts is a throwaway thing. That's why I hate things like Slack. I don't get it. It's also, I don't like Twitter, because it just goes into the ether. So one of the things that I've proposed via PDF that I link to in Twitter is a really, really simple mechanism where, and now going slightly sideways, but how about this? How about if we start blogging, but instead of just doing it like in the olden days, we use the infrastructures, and all we're allowed to do is refer to each other's posts, right? And the interface is an RSS feed. the reason I think this might be useful is that then the data will be in the most open thing we have, which is HTML, using Atom, RSS, whatever, for threading. So then instead of writing something on Twitter that is then lost, we have it in our own environment. I'm not saying we should do this. It's just a strong suggestion. But if we agree on something like that, where it isn't on a Google Doc, it's not on a Slack thing, it is our stuff. I don't think it'll be that hard to implement. And also then we may have a place to put these user stories and feature sets. I think Bob and Alan are talking about two slightly different things, and that's great. We need lists of those two things. But let me just put my hand up here and ask, because Alan has put such thought and effort in, so I'm not asking you, I'm asking everyone else, Alan. You've already said yes. On a regular weekly basis, guys, are you willing to if you have your favorite way of communicating, whatever it might be, if that is what we use, are you willing to put down some thoughts in actual text? Because if so, we should really invest in how we do that. But this forum has very long been very, very open, and we haven't done that. So that's why I need to take the temperature on that. Anyone want to comment on how much time they want to spend outside of our 2 hours?
What the book was that? I thought that was the point of the book.
Yes, but it can't go in the book if I don't have it. Right, so
But you can't, okay, so let me make a quick pitch to counter for Slack. And that is agreed, all the hesitations about it being locked in and stuff like that. But there are plugins, there are ways to easily export it. Future of Coding, no relation to Future of Text, but right, okay, great. They operate in Slack for that reason and not Discord, even though I'm more in Discord than I'm in Slack. They use Slack because they can export the material and they publish the conversations on the Future of Coding site, right? Now, the advantage of that to the posting and blogging is granted entirely mental. But if we're trying to get transactional comments back and forth to get the velocity that we need to get to, then, you know, the only time that we talk is when we're in Twitter in this little ancient DM, right? We need something that's as convenient as that, and ideally one that can be broken into just a couple of channels so we can go pivot from crazy principles about, you know, holograms to what needs to be on the plate this week, you know? And we can export all of it, right? Or should be able to. And then so we get our cake and eat it too. I do agree that we shouldn't be locked into it.
I mean, if you guys think, you know, some of these are just going to have to be consensus. If you do like Slack, we'll just do Slack, that's fine. I just wanted to really highlight what I meant to say is that if, for instance, we use only Future Text Lab blog for this problem is solved because of pings and replies, right? Blogging was amazing until Google decided to mess it all up by buying Blogger and all these things and then throwing it down the toilet. The infrastructures are so open and beautiful. And the reason it's interesting is, and this is really comes back to the early point of this discussion and Bob Horn's email is, what the heck is XR for? Yes, it'll probably be nice to sit down with a fake fireplace in a dark room to read page by page. Sometimes I think we will actually need that to get away from the world. But I think it has been made clear by all the experiments we've done that the chief thing of XR is tons of data. So that's why I think we have agreed that getting the metadata into the XR environment to get, you know, a couple of thousand documents with citation metadata, but also entities inside them or whatever the heck interests the individual user. So we can start, you know, sculpting this thing will be really, really important too. So what I realized was if we decide to use the HTML model for that, which I fought against for many, many years. Oh, here's Brundle, great. Hey, Brundle. Hey, okay, so we're having a little discussion now leading up to how we're going to get stuff online. And we're talking about how we're going to handle user stories / features in our own dialogue. One of the issues that was just brought up now by me was that maybe we've become an entirely HTML world for two reasons. One reason is it's not that hard, even from visual meta, to export to HTML. You know, I want visual meta, of course I do, but that doesn't have to be live in XR. I'm not that, you know, boneheaded. But the other side of it is, if we do our blogging properly, we have our own dialogue there as well, not on Slack, not on Twitter, not anywhere else. So we have the same data for our own dialogue as we have for our own documents. So if we have a mechanism through which we can easily access that in XR, we can take a lot of that metadata and start building, hopefully, useful interactions. That's why I've completely changed, and now it's all HTML is the best, yay.
One caveat is that you can't use HTML in XR. Not yet.
I was wondering
we're
about
working
that.
on it.
What, you can't use HTML and XR?
Yeah,
Is that-
HTML pages are 2D.
It's the closest thing we have to plain text that has tags on it. We don't have to display it as that.
Cool. No, yeah. It's just in the context in which, so all of the applications that we've developed hitherto in XR are using WebXR, and that's a system whereby you have the ability to display pixels directly, which means that you need to be directly responsible for the mechanisms by which those characters are separated. That's not the long-term goal for the way that XR with text per se should exist, and that's why I personally am. I mean, on behalf of a fruit company, I'm proposing the HTML model element, but the broader vision for the concept of a spatial web is that it has the ability for HTML specifically to be able to do that. But just to be clear, you cannot today.
I'm not talking about building XR worlds out of HTML. That's not what I mean. What I mean is simply, Alan has started a really good conversation of what we should be able to do in XR. And can someone else please copy and repaste so Brandel can see
Here,
them?
now look, I'm gonna throw you guys a link to I'm gonna share it, and I'm gonna do the equivalent of what would be on WordPress. And it'll just be I'm sending it, pasting it in right now. And in fact, I can even invite you all to this if you'd like to add to it.
Okay, hang on. But before we go in many different directions, I am not saying that we should not do WebXR. I don't understand where that comes from. Sorry, I'm referring, Alan, not to you, but I'm referring to the comments. Several different things about HTML and WebXR. All I'm talking about is you highlighted something really important that also came up with my meeting with ACM last week. I had a meeting with the technical and head of the library. They are extremely socially helpful, extremely practically not helpful. Let's just put it that way, right? I think they would agree with that themselves. What they want in XR in a while is to be able to be in an XR environment with their library to interact with other people. So I think, Alan, one of the key things that you really highlighted early on with your questions here, or your wishes, is the fact that it shouldn't just be a document. And Adam 2 weeks ago said we need to have information about the library. All I'm saying is we need to figure out a really simple, open way to take your library and a dialogue into this environment. Of course, we don't render in HTML over. And Mark, are you on this or something else? You've had your hand up for a long time. You must be tired.
Yeah, well, it probably just swung back into focus. I was just going to make the point that we really need to let go of the handrail and stop talking about documents and thinking in terms of sort of square rectangles of paper. I mean, a document is just a collection of data, so it is self metadata. Whether it contains this format or that format is really immaterial. If we start to think of it in terms of the data we want to use, I think it becomes a lot cleaner. Because a lot of the friction has come from worrying about whether it's this format or other. And it goes back to, I mean, as Brad has rightly said, okay, fine. Well, you can put HTML in a two-dimensional thing in this construct. What does it do? But the point is, so what we're talking about is the means to move it backwards and forwards. And your point about going in and out. So one of the questions is, what is the sort of minimum sufficiency of wrapper around this, whatever it is inside, that gets it through the door? And then we don't have to worry about what's inside. That's a rendering problem inside, for instance, your XR construct or something. But I think worrying about getting format X or format Y through that slot is the wrong way to look at it. Just think of it as a data problem, and therefore we have to decide what data is needed. End.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Fabien.
So my advice, in order not to go meta for too long is to have a deadline on, for example, what format we need or we agree on before mid-January or whatever. What server we use. Some of them are being fixed already and decided, like WebXR. But honestly, of course, we need a platform we can rely on, like Slack or whatever. And I think that for all of us and our own sanity, that can only take so long. And some of us are going to be disappointed in whatever we use anyway. So at some point, if we don't like have, let's say, a deadline for this and that, it's going to tire us for things that are not very intellectually rewarding. And some of those choices are not going to be optimal. But I would argue that's okay. So I would advise for a couple of deadline in whatever is a blocking issue. Say, I don't know what those would be, but yeah. Otherwise, I'm a little bit worried that we might go in loop for too long for people to stay as excited as they were.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the challenge of how to balance that. I sent in 2 links here. I had a meeting with Björn Bovud. He stayed with me for a few days in Norway last week. He is an extremely knowledgeable person with networking. And he made one thing really, really clear for me. In a normal networking environment, I'm sure this is obvious to most of you, if not everyone, don't expose the database to the API, because then it's just going to be bypassed and you're bought into it. It is really, really important that we have an abstraction on the server side and on the client side. The reason that is so important is that the promises you make, which is how he phrases APIs, it's a promise. If people start going directly to the source, you're not sure how to move things. So when it comes to our architecturing, it probably makes a lot of sense that, I want to maybe use iCloud. Fabien would jump out the window if he had to use iCloud. Ideally, it shouldn't matter, right? We need to have some sort of an interface that, like in the first internet computers, they had IMPs, remember? Interface messaging processor things. We need to have that level of abstraction, because otherwise I do think we'll do the looping. I do think we'll talk about a lot of preferences, but if we all agree on what data should be transferred and how it should be handled, then we can start building something. And if it sucks, with the greatest joy, we can throw it away and have lost nothing. Does that make sense? Before Peter speaks, any hand or head movements on that one? No? Okay. All right, Peter.
Yeah, no, I've no objection. All I wanted to do is make sure that there was people had an understanding of the difference between HTML as underpinning sort of schema for representing information versus the literal sort of deployment of it as a last moment before it reaches the user's eyes.
I didn't know that, but
likewise,
that's a bummer. But I figured, yeah, like obviously 2D, right?
Yeah.
But
yeah,
okay.
all work in progress. And then to that same end, there's a difference between HTML as a representation schema and the sort of the standard deployment of HTML on a series of web pages. They don't have to go together either. And so if you want to have a local first archive, you want to have anything like that, then it's perfectly acceptable to do so. The choice of HTML per se does not limit you to a particular sort of way of succumbing to link rot, for example. But yeah, sorry, that's all.
Thank you, Peter.
Okay, I think it's really important for us to have an abstraction layer wrapped around the data itself, so that whatever tech we have for transferring data in and out of the headsets and to the desktop should be completely agnostic of what the underlying protocol for the data is. So all that the data transfer layer needs to know is what grammar, specification, whatever you want to call it, describes the data, and then a block of text that contains the data. And then we can go and I might decide I want to use YAML as an underlying data format. Someone else might want to be using JSON. And as long as there's a point where the system can find that grammar specification, we can make it plug in with the rest of the ecosystem. And all that can be done independently of whatever code we write for moving the data around from one subsystem to another. If we latch on to any kind of a grammar or document type definition at the outset before we have that transfer protocol in place. The transfer protocol could get bound to that data format, and then we'd have to have an extra layer wrapped around whatever other formats we might want to develop down the road. So basically it keeps our options open. If all you have again in the initial data is here's where the data specification is going to be, independent of the underlying text block of data itself.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable. Any comments on that before Bob? Okay, Bob.
Did you say for me?
Yes.
Yes.
Anybody have
I
any
would-
comments on Peter before you? So please go ahead, Bob.
No.
But you have your hand up. I thought you wanted to say something.
I would like to share a screen for a moment.
Okay.
I've been wondering what it might look like. what when I put on my mask, what my data and my thinking might look like. This is not mine. This is there's a very interesting group of Norwegians at the University of Oslo Architecture School who are doing something like they're calling giga mapping. And they've got a big important book out on it. They come out of the systems design world and are working on very complex situations in the world, but from academia. That is, they're training academics to deal with the kind of complexity that we face in the world. And this is just one of many of the gigamaps that they have made. I think they go beyond the information map, the infomap, infomural kind of things that I've been doing, because they have a whole process of creating these. And this is it's one of the ways that I imagine important data would be connected in our complex world. So maybe we want to aspire to this. I just wanted to show it to people. And that's all I want to say right now.
Thanks, Bob.
Happy to answer questions.
I love that,
And-
Bob. Thank
I
you.
got to think. Oh, go ahead. A very similar thing to that is I may have shared it in the group chat, but it's the recently someone did a beautiful interactive system design teardown explosion diagram of various large language models. So
I'd
I
like
will throw it in there.
I'd like to see that.
I'm going to throw it in just a second, and it is gorgeous. And when I was, to your point, when I was looking at it and playing with it, I was like, this is actually a way that I would like to read in XR, where instead of reading like this, if I could say, okay, now I want to move away. It's the machine. I want to see, so it looks remarkably like what you just showed. I'll throw it in just a moment.
And can you send us all a link to it, please?
Yes. Coming up.
Everything in the chat is up on the Future Text website.
But as I said, I've been unable to copy out the information, so I can't then process it.
I'll share my screen real quick and show you if you like, or we can get back on topic. Either way.
It's on a normal website. You can see it. Just go to futuretextlab.info and all our record is there. Just for the future. So, and one of the things we probably need to structure a little bit with our discussions is discussions of what we want to do in XR and how we're going to make it possible. So when it comes to how are we going to make it possible? There are not an infinity of options. You know, there are some contenders stronger than others. So let me just take a straw poll and see what we agree on already. The first one we do agree with is we should start well with this mechanism whereby the user can have their own academic library. And don't forget, the Sloan Foundation track that we're being funded under is for academic documents. It is not general dialogue, right? So we agree that they should be able to somehow point to their own library or put their library onto some sort of a online available resource. By online, it could also mean local online. So we agree on that, right?
I don't, what do you mean agree? Like, I understand the proposal. Are you saying, are we agreeing that this is a thing that will be valuable to other people?
I'm saying that the proposal that we got from Sloan, it says that this will be their own users' data and it'll be academic documents. So that's really important that we stick to that. So what I'm running through now is just to see where we have agreement, to see where we don't, you know, where to put our dialogue so we don't talk to ourselves. So the first point is, do we agree that for ourselves and for Sloan and for an academic user, we should make the end user make their own PDFs available, because that is the format as it is. And then there should be some sort of a mechanism whereby they can view individual documents to read, as well as the library. And by library, I define it as two things. One, the items themselves and the shape of the library, to go back to what Adam hammered into my head. You know, how things are, what the metadata for the library itself is. We agree on that, right? So then the question becomes twofold. How do you get it from the personal computer to the headset? And then when interactions have been done at that headset, how do you then update the user's library, or don't you? In internet communication stuff, or well, databases, as you know better than me, and I'm learning now, there is such a thing as a list command. You have get, delete, pull, all these exciting things. Not pull, put. The get command is fascinating because it's so simple, but it can be quite large. So in theory, we should be able to have a list command that contain the entire metadata of a library, including the library layout itself. So then we get into issues of, for this, and you know, for the dream, you know, that's something else. But for what we're delivering in a year, when someone puts on their headsets, Alan, I agree with you. I want to annotate and I want to share from there. But are we saying for the first level that we think we can achieve that? Or are we saying that it's basically try to build something? You know, to what level are we trying to use this?
That's an excellent question. Yeah, go ahead, Brandel.
A web-based interface means that, you know, every client, the traditional model of what the web means is that there are these kind of stateless posters that just give you things when you ask for them, and the notion of internal state is managed entirely by the client, and it's be that the user, as in the physical person, or the user agent being the browser. That's not, you know, a metaphor that we're required to abide by these days. And so, you know, like almost in practice, almost all servers and most things, people have to have enough of a sense of what a given user is to be able to make determinations about their local state. And it's possible for them with opt-in, either by virtue of the browser itself or from the application, the web application in question, to be able to coordinate and say what it is that the local user has done to augment or modulate their notion of the specific view that they have. You know, and so that means at an email level, for example, that Gmail knows which page you're on. What it may or may not know is, but it's unlikely to know, you know, where your cursor is, or it may not necessarily have a particular opinion about how big your window is. And so, there's this continuum of local state information that people sort of decide is relevant for the server side encoding of what it is that somebody's doing. One of the questions, one of the challenges with XR is that we don't necessarily know what are sort of germane details of a given user's local view of something that are relevant for the configuration of state from a server perspective. For example, with a typical modern headset, you get the frame you have to render at somewhere between 72 and 120 frames per second, depending on the device. So Quest goes down to 72, and Vive and other things like that like to hit 120. And a number of numbers in between. And that's probably not appropriate information for a server under most circumstances to make use of. The exact vantage point of a user's head is something that is probably going to be sort of used on the local side to make decisions. But there's a lot about what a view is that probably could be encoded and sent back to the server about what a view constitutes in terms of having a semantic significance, as well as just that literal, like, where are my eyes right now?
I'm conceptually separating a few things here, and it's really important to see if we agree on this. The act of accessing a full PDF, I see as being quite separate, because they're big and annoying. Right? So that almost might be put on a web server and download it if you need it. Of course, of course, we should get to a point where the web server may be built into the XR software itself, in the future. But so that's one thing. I've been really, where are you? There you are. The whole Adam. It's the third time I'm mentioning it, but Adam really pointed out the importance of the library itself having metadata. So I think we should separate that as well. Because the thing that I'm doing now with Reader, so spending my own money that I don't have to prepare for this, is that entity extraction thing, so that the user can go through their PDFs, find all the kind of names in every document they want added to the visual meta. That's so that there's a richer grab in the library. Now, I don't mind how that goes to the WebXR system. I think we just need to define something, and I tell my programmers, this is what the groups decided. On our server, we keep, on our system, keep it visual meta. But the way it is uploaded, maybe we should have, because we talked about the abstractions, we define a little headset piece and a little computer piece and what goes between them. Maybe that's an early thing to do. And when it comes to the library itself, we don't know what should be in there. We know the minimum. So we need to decide how to even decide what is relevant to go in the library. Yeah.
This is great. Can I ask for a quick summary of sort of what we've talked about, but also, so we don't have to do the user stories. I heard one theme there. Library seems like almost a requirement of a library is that it has metadata. We can argue the how's and implementation, but we got that. Okay, so what else do we need? And this is probably just a review because we've talked about all this already.
Okay, yeah, this is good. So Adam, please cut in, but I'll start this. In the Reader library today, the metadata we have about the library includes which documents are hidden, because they're accessible through search. You don't want to see them in a list on a small screen. We have which documents are pinned to the top or favorites, so whatever the terminology should be. We also have all highlighted text in the individual document and associated with them, so you can search for highlighted text. And very soon, we will have the entity extraction through AI, meaning that the user has said, here's a script that I want to run on this document, extract the names of places or products or whatever it might be, that will also be there, also for searches. So those are the 2D list ones. Then we have to decide, of course, once we're in an XR space, how do we want to determine where things are? And this is the thing we've been talking of, where are we talking about that wall on the left as being the blue rectangle, or are we talking about it having a semantic value as the picture wall? and so on. This, so it gets very interesting. Other things we have is, because of the entity extraction, because of the identities of the authors, geography comes into it. So we may very well need to start defining how to show something on a map, a world map of all kinds of documents. And then, of course, we're going to have the extremely tricky issue of timeline. We're going to have to find a way to humanize it so we don't have weird beginnings and ends of things.
Okay, so let's differentiate that. What I'm hearing is this is great. I've heard library, I've heard metadata. We're going to keep those separate. The metadata is used for, in one sense, representation, right? And in another sense, to power search. Okay, so now we got two more things.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Hang on, just on the terminology here. Your hands and your balloons, it's brilliant. What we're talking about is also, a library is a set of documents. It is also a description of how those documents are lying around on your table or on your wall, how they organized. Is the cover missing, that kind of stuff. That's
or in space, or in three-dimensional space.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's the whole point. So that there is the document itself, the information about the document, information about the library.
Great.
However, I use the term library, but Björn said that the term library may be a bit restrictive. Maybe it's context or environment, because I may choose in different rooms with my XR headsets to define different aspects of it differently. This is something that Peter's talked about. You go into a different room and the same documents have a completely different layout.
Okay, so we've got library, we've got metadata, we've got search and presentation of whatever. We'll leave that alone for now. And it's also to be put everything on the surface. We've got documents, right? What else have we got to make this thing totally understood and obvious?
We want our documents to be clonable too. So
Yeah.
I can compare something into 2 copies and have them in different places. If there's more than one place it belongs.
I'll add that as a thing inside of docs, but like running through from putting on the helmet, or even before that, from finding the document on a 2D screen, what are the other steps needed?
The other stuff is the actual user. And that is really, really important, because when I had that infamous ACM meeting, Jack, he wanted to interact with lots of documents with other people. And there are many ways to do that. But a simple thing we should probably do now is, whether you're in a 2D or XR space, if you make an annotation, the document should know who did that. Right? So
Okay, so user's activity, user identity and activity.
User identity and the marks we leave behind, because Alan, imagine if you send a document to Leon, whether it's an XR or 2D space, it's useful to know that when Brandel reads it, he can see who highlighted what and who annotated what.
Sure. Okay, got it. User, doc, presentation, search, metadata, library. What are some other themes?
So, Alan, you're one of the other things I think you rightly drawing out is, when something moves through to the XR space, is it a sense of an object itself in the XR space, or is it essentially an echo, as it were, of something that exists outside the XR space? That has an implication for then, so if you clone it in XR, are you cloning it outside? So where does in a sense, where does a master record live? Right. I don't know the answer to that.
And my spiel about what are sort of characteristics of the view mode is also to point at what point do you make a distinction between a semantically significant sort of view state change that is relevant for the purposes of encoding the meaning of somebody's kind of manipulation and view of it. It's very likely not to be the 90 FPS kind of update of exactly where somebody's eyes are. But if somebody attends to a specific set of documents by directing their gaze toward them or their head toward them, does that constitute a significant enough action to indicate that, in a social context or in a persistent context, that this is an action that has been taken over the body of information within there. And that's a genuine question. It's like, where do you draw those lines depends on what you consider to be important. It's incredibly frustrating that Adobe Illustrator doesn't encode my view translations as important as my pen strokes or my tool selection actions, because they are every bit as relevant as semantic actions in a context where I have such a multiplicity of data that I do feel for those things, and I would like to have them.
Can you sum that up as a theme or several themes? Because that was brilliant, and then I'm trying to figure out how to write it with this horrible lag time that I have on a shared document.
Okay, sorry. Do you want to go ahead, Frode, or do you want me to try to summarize?
That was to you, right, Brandel? I'm happy continuing on this.
Yeah, it was. It's identifying the threshold of semantically significant view actions. I think that's fair.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Like affordances. Like, what can you do with the document? Is that what you mean?
It's more so you can do not that you can do everything, but there will be a multiplicity of things that you can do. And some of those will be simply to do with being able to change your hand from like this to like that. That doesn't constitute a semantically significant action within the context of a document manipulation system. But moving this document from here to here might, or actually persistently looking in this direction versus that direction genuinely may constitute an action of significance.
Right.
And so understanding the continuum or the thresholds is a critical thing to be able to do, and it needs to be up for identification and discussion. Sure, like it's obviously the case that opening a document, that's a semantically hard-edged thing that involves file IO, that does all of these different things. But expanding and collapsing a section in a document, you could go either way on it, right? So
Excellent.
it's one of those things where, yeah.
So this is getting to the actual interface part, which is for me personally, the most interesting part, right? We just have to make sure. Yeah. So, okay, that's perfect. Great. Yeah. And it's different than the interfaces in like the screen that you're seeing. It's the interface in the sense of like the keyboard that you could type or change of direction. Yeah.
The key word that I heard was semantic, and that has to do with having some sort of stabilities and namings that so that you can access them.
Look, Brandel is cartoonified. There's a lot to continue on here. I just wanted, Alan, to the list you're writing, I wanted to add processes along with the other things, because they, think of it as agents or not agent, but processes, cron jobs even. Dene here writes non-trivial activities. So the thing that I found over the last few weeks with experimenting with more mundane AI is that this really differs from person to person. So that's why in Reader, we're allowing the user to define their own prompts for what they want out of the document for metadata. So it's probably going to be that what you do in an XR environment will greatly differ from person to person. I can imagine a speaker presenting, even with documents, wanting a very, very different record of what they do compared to someone maybe with some maybe physical disabilities who may not even be able to control everything. So I would say that's probably under the category of in XR, store as much as we can and let the user later choose what they want to do with it. I think it is mostly out of our scope for now, but it's definitely part of our thinking.
Okay, great. I've got that down, and we could figure out later if that falls in, if that's the same thing as event stream or it needs to be different, but this is excellent. Definitely we've got themes that are gestural or physical affordances versus background processes. So we can, even if we have to make, larger families of themes, we can do that. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, I just want to check, I put in the sidebar, I just want to check it makes sense that when we talk about the semantic, are we talking in relation to a document or the environment, the construct it's in? or both? I don't know the answer there, but so if I, in the sense of if I have 20 documents, do they all need to have part of that that information, or is, I mean, again, there is no obvious answer to this. It's more that it's something we'll have to mull through.
Yeah, I would say it depends on the integrity of the concept of document and the context of the space that you have. Like if it's reasonable to relate it directly back to a specific document, and that's kind of a unit of measure that you wish to retain, then yes, it's a document thing. But depending on what you want to do with it, you could manipulate them in all sorts of different ways, in which you have just a sort of a space in which to apprehend all of the elements. That said, and I understand that, you have a grant and an actual thing to do. And so, waffling eloquent about all of these things can be kind of scary. My suggestion is also to be as like underwhelming and as conservative with the scope of the goal in order to be able to meet it really well, rather than to set one's sights particularly high. Yeah, you can use documents in as traditional way as you like, but yeah, it may be necessary to kind of have some kind of glue, some bridge between is this action on this document or that, to say that it's in the totality of the space, which maybe is actually represented by the fact that you have Alice in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass as the documents that were in the space at the time.
So I want to talk a little bit about me. Not only because I'm wearing a Norwegian sweater and I'm wondering, all of this could be information, couldn't it, in a virtual environment? It could be patterns of our previous discussion, right? It could be a QR code. But no, the reason I want to talk about me, and I want to talk about me in relation to you, is to make two things really, really clear. Project management for this, I find really, really difficult and stressful. I am extremely grateful for you guys. And I just have to say it plainly, because if I at times seem to withdraw somehow from engagement or be frustrated, please put it in your brains that comes from a place of, I know you guys are dedicated and much more intelligent than I will ever be, and I mean that. So sometimes I just have to readjust. So if you ever feel in this community that I'm being difficult, please remember that, and please also feel free later to say that's not on, because doing the fact that in a year, and I have a child like many of you, you only have 1 year with a 6-year-old, 1 year with a 7-year-old. Time flies so fast, right? It's insane. So the year we have to produce the software, it's literally no time at all. Since we started doing the books, I have this much books on my table downstairs. So Alan asking difficult questions, thank you. Peter going up in random directions, thank you. Fabien implementing stuff I don't understand, thank you. I really need you to understand that, so we can have a really open and positively flowing atmosphere, okay? So Alan, and then hopefully soon Fabien will have something to show us.
Great. Yes. Oh, and if you refresh on the page, I've added a couple of blocks, including Fabien's demo and the themes up top that, it's all work in progress. Feel free to send me, scrape it all, send your version of it and everything. Fabien, sorry, Brundle, to your point about the semantics and the degrees of freedom, that kind of conversation, I think that brings up a really interesting, harder question and thing that I would love for the group to discuss sooner than later, which is, what are our assumptions about what we think a reader, a user of this product that is not one of us, will get value out of this, that is unique to XR and academic material, I guess. And then how does that map what we think that they want to do? How does that map to what we can currently accomplish, right? Because it might be that at the end of the day, and there's no shame in this, I can think of several awesome apps where you might think that they could handle a giant problem, but you go there and they handle one tiny problem, right? Like send the highlight to your email, right? Or whatever. But at least they do it really well, and it's a delight. So that versus something that's trying to do a whole, wafty experience and scuttling every single part of it. I'd love to get a map of those two things: what we think they want to do, what we can actually do, or what we think we can actually do.
So I will defer to, I think, Adam and possibly Fabien about where we understand the capabilities of PDFs to be. PDF is a very broad church, and so I think in the context of being for academic writing and PDFs and papers, I don't know whether we've elected to make determinations about the age and quality of PDF. Some PDFs actually have a pretty high degree of semantic information. Some are scans of typewritten pages, and those are hard. So yeah, that might actually be one kind of focusing question.
Yeah, Adam, I would be very happy to hear from you on this, but we can specify context. We can say that we're only supporting PDFs after a certain year, or only produced in a certain process, let's say ACM. We do not have to support every kind of thing, not fully anyway. But also, I think that reading a PDF will be the last thing people will do in the headset. They'll go in there and see Brandel's million points of light.
Right. No, the reason why I bring up PDF in its current form is not because I love it, but because there may be an upper bound in terms of the extractability of information, such that you could be able to make use of semantic structures that we can determine to say that this paragraph follows that paragraph, or even that these characters are arranged in a word. They can get bad, is what I'm saying. And so depending on where you want to put your smarts, where you want to sort of, and there are optical character recognition systems. Like, I've actually been relatively impressed with Zachernuk, the open source to Google sort of system. It actually doesn't do great on multi-column layout. So if you have the ability to provide input on it, those things have an impact on the scope and scale of what you will be able to extract, given that it's likely that PDF is going to be your source of truth.
It absolutely does. There's no question. But the maturity of renderings of PDF in available for desktop systems and in XR, as I understand it, is vastly different. So I'm expecting that a lot of heavy lifting will necessarily be done on a traditional system like I'm doing now. I thought I was opening a bad scan. It wasn't. It's actually a very good document. But even on a really bad scan that is entirely OCR, the AI actually managed to extract a lot of stuff. I don't think we should expect that to be possible in the WebXR. Most of the proper heavy reading we'll do on a traditional, will allow someone to open it in XR, but the key thing in XR is to use that seriously amazing metadata to see connections and shapes.
So this is a great segue, though, and I've got a feeling where the group wants to head on this, but I'll present it anyway. It seems to me like there's a pretty severe inflection point between I want to be able to view my set of documents in a 3D space versus here's 5 documents that I know are already 3D'able, right? Like, we do an inconvenient truth kind of thing over, maybe not that intense, but like, here are 5 documents that we have tailored for this experience. You can choose them and do what you want with them and go to see how this content can be immersive. Is that a better value than I'm going to upload my PDFs and now see them kind of all around me?
That is a fantastically interesting question. I have to go away for a second. Mark, please go. I can still listen. I just have to go around the corner.
Okay. Sorry, I was just sort of thinking on the fact that I think most of the academic PDFs I come across, even recent ones, are from the very bottom end of the capability curve. That's just how life is. But one thing I think it's perfectly possible for us to do is to accept that for instance, not to say all is lost. I mean, there is a problem with legacy documents, but it's perfectly possible to say that, for instance, there are things that you could do now if you bothered with a PDF that would enable us to do the things we want to do. One of the roadblocks here is the inconvenient fact that, for better or worse, academia took a bad turn with PDFs. It does give you an immutable copy, but it's marred in the print world, and we're 20 years beyond the print world. So we need that immutable copy, but we also need a copy that's usable in the digital domain, and which machine learning can get at. And if we need to read it in 40-point text on the ceiling, we can do so without in any way destroying essentially what was the original. This is the disconnect,
right?
So I think trying to solve that underlying problem is probably one we shouldn't do. But what we can say is that we can look beyond that. We know that the things we want to do could be put into this traditional format if that's the way the world wants to go. But the things we want to do, we need to be able to do. You're not going to do it with something that's a scan of a JPEG. And I think a lot of people don't know that yet, and they need to understand it. And that's one of the things I think we could, it may be blindingly obvious to us, but I don't think it's blindingly obvious to a lot of people. And I think that's one thing we need to do.
Totally. And so making concrete decisions about whether you want to make the most of the best documents or make the best of the most documents is a big decision that should probably come up front. Do you want to be able to deal with all of the PDFs that say, not the ones that are just like scans of bitmap JPEGs or worse, but if you want to have things that at least have type in them, but they're not the best, but you want to be able to sort of deal with like a good broad swathe of data that somebody could reasonably expect to use, rather than something that somebody has a high expectation of curating and tailoring and optimizing. Because I can not to blow my own trumpet, but I can probably fix any one document you give me, anyone gives me, as long as it's not the Voynich manuscript, I can probably get it into XR. But the challenge of being able to do that to 1,000 or 100,000 documents is very different.
Okay.
I agree. Very important comment, Mark. Yes. Important distinction.
Right. So the answer to that, despite the stress of project management, absolutely, definitely both. I do not see them as being opposed to each other in terms of effort, because, and I'm very happy for Fabien to talk and show something very soon, but so here's the way I look at this. The metadata for each document isn't that hard to generate. It's something that I'm doing now. And I'm storing in visual meta, but that's wholly irrelevant. How the XR environment requests it is up to the group. I'll convert it and have it sent on its way. But what was brought up by the 3D ability now is so important, and I haven't thought about that for the last couple of weeks, but it is something we've talked about before. So for those special documents whereby, let's say in the authoring system, whatever it might be, you draw a rectangle and say inside here be dragons, right? And you put a 3D model in, or you put data in, or whatever. I think once we have a transport mechanism with a basic metadata, whether you upload a plain PDF for viewing one, or whether you have an augmented PDF with the kind of absolute brilliance that Brandel has done before, that I think that can absolutely go in parallel. Okay, Dene, you, and then Fabien.
I want Fabien to go and show what he's doing before I head off to school.
Okay.
By the way, can I ask one more question? Next week is Monday. Monday is, I think, Christmas Day.
For crying out loud.
So I propose that we put the lab on hiatus, and then the next week is New Year's Day. So I don't mind working on New Year's Day. Some of you may have a problem with that, but Christmas Day I don't want to work on.
Should we do Boxing Day or the day after for those who want to do it?
I don't object. I actually will be on my own until the 20th, so I can do whatever I want. But I understand that other people may be celebrating things.
So we do Tuesday week then instead of Monday. Okay, Tuesday week it is, and Fabien, go.
Yeah, I won't do a demo right now because that's not going to be ideal condition. So just imagine that things are permanent. That's it. You move stuff, you come back, it's there. I think it's straightforward enough. What I wanted to touch on before on enhancing document versus managing a library or a set of documents, my preference from sadly just how easy it is would be managing a set of documents with minimal annotation on them. Let's say either highlights or sticky notes or things people are familiar with. But rendering the document proper, even if it's just a PDF or just an HTML, I think it's really hard. So having a view of it, low res, let's say view of it, I think that's realistic. Having some annotation of it is realistic. Managing a collection to say, oh, I want to prioritize this, or I want to dismiss this, it's very realistic. I think all that is usable. If we need to display the document proper, it's like kind of competing with an existing medium, either printing the PDF or having the desktop with all the powerful tools in it. And I think it's really hard, basically. I don't know how to do this I know how to do this on a normal desktop, but on a new medium with new interactions, I don't think that's realistic in 1 year. I'd love to be wrong, but that's why I would stick to, let's say, managing a collection with the minimal annotation of the set of documents.
Can I add to that? I totally agree. In fact, and this changes the nature of the project somewhat without obviously being different than the what's in the proposal. But if we somehow decided that, like, hey, actually we just want to stick to like 5, let's say 2 main pieces of text, right? And maybe a moat of 5 or so. And then we say, let's make those 2 pieces of text let's really juice up what can be done in 3D. And let's also focus on, we can have a hypothesis here, that seeing the connections between various PDFs, various documents, is going to be easier in XR. So then if we had that opinion, then we can say, let's pick out these certain ones where we can focus on this part of this PDF and how it applies to these 3 other documents. You see what I mean? And now we have a point of view to bring to this, that we actually want to show this way of viewing some PDFs, smoke and mirrors, Doug Engelbart style, is the way to read in the future, assuming, of course, big caveat, that all PDFs were connected in this exciting way.
Yeah, right. Yes, this is very, very beautiful and very, very good. So the thing is, the idea of connecting these things and seeing in space is, I think, going to be 80–90% of our research. Because the more we look at it, the more we think about it, the more complex it gets. So if we do that, and then we also experiment with a few made for XR PDFs, so to speak, it's going to be amazing, because then in a year we'll be able to say, here's all the documents in the ACM library under the hypertext, for instance. And you can see them this and this way. You can see how they connect, you can interact with them like that. And now here this is the paper we're submitting to this year's hypertext conference. Guess what? We made it magic. We find ways, just that bit, even if we have to just hack it and cheat, right? And not worry about standards too much, but if it just works, just to open eyes. I mean, we've all seen early on the iPad, you open up a document and a book and children's book and things move and stuff. We can do that. We can do that in a useful way, and we can do it in multiple dimensions. Fabien, you have to go, you said, but did you want to show, or are you waiting till next week?
Based on the luck I have with screen sharing, I'll say keep it for next time.
Okay. Now, are we any closer?
Bye, everybody. Bye,
Bye-bye.
Fabien. Rob,
Oh, you're going? Oh, okay. Yep. See you next week. Merry Christmas.
Rob,
Merry Christmas.
I'll send you an email. Huh? I'll see. Have a good Christmas, everybody. Good holiday.
Oh, are you going
You
to?
too.
Huh?
Happy
Are you
holiday.
leaving
Yes.
too? Okay.
Yes,
See you later,
9:30.
Dene.
See
Thank
everybody.
you for the best Christmas present, Dene. Bye.
Thanks to everybody. Love you all.
Oh, Leon is going too. Oh no, the house is falling apart. Okay, now that there's just a few of us, what are we going to decide? Actually, I would like to hear Adam just ramble for a bit, if Adam doesn't mind, how he sees the state of affairs, because Adam is the quiet one who does things, and suddenly we get all confused.
It's not a good prompt to ramble. Well, one thing is that I find the single document experience also quite interesting. An aggressive cutting up of a document, or a very active reading of a document. Was it Bob that sent the reading article about the hardness of
Yes.
reading in digital? That it was a very good article, and I thought about XR when I read it, and what we could do in XR to kind of simulate or create the environment where you're really active when reading. Because when you have a desktop, you don't touch anything or you don't do anything. I have this habit of selecting text with my cursor to read, to be kind of a temporary highlighter. But in XR, we have our digital hands. We have more things to do, and perhaps even voice, but we can move things around and we could pull text out. And before I played with the idea of pulling text, pull quotes, where you pull quotes out of the documents, so you put them on the side of the document or in the margin. I really want to try that out in XR more, where you really pull text out, possibly also adding your own comments to those pull quotes, your own thoughts. So that is kind of a very active reading in XR, and I find that very interesting to see if there is something to be done there to actually be able to read complicated things in XR. There was something about that in that article you sent about the skimming part, how it basically, and I thought it basically, we're making nouns out of everything. When we skim, we just find keywords, and that we're making nouns of everything there. So we're making a map of the information, but we don't really process the information. And in order to process or read deeply, I wonder if in XR can do, and this is maybe out of scope, but we should really be able to visualize the sentence structures more. I don't know if we can explode the sentences more and help us read in a XR, but we have argument mapping on the whole paper, but we also have for sentences that we could explode the sentences a bit more to see who does what or in which order things come, and I think that is lost when you skimming text. You don't read that way, and I want to get back into that and to have a computer supported reading in that way. This was my rambling. No clear thoughts. Yep.
Adam, that was not a ramble. You failed on your rambling. That was extremely useful. I see Peter and Alan here. Just really briefly to say that the reason I'm quote unquote stressed about just get some way to get the documents there and the metadata is this is so important to experiment with what you're talking about. Because, on one side, we have the library metadata. On the other side, we have an augmented for XR document. In the middle, we have incredible opportunity too. We absolutely do. To make the kind of things you're talking about, to be able to maybe even on a 2D screen do things so it's prepped for XR, I don't know. But once we can start doing this, we can start experimenting. So thank you. Peter.
Yeah, I thought it might be interesting if we could have fine-grained control of the z-plane of text in a PDF, so that based upon some external data feed, we might have individual words and phrases move forward or back by, say, just a subtle amount, maybe a quarter to a half inch forward or back. And And then that might almost be able to be usable as an ambient display. If you were looking at an index, you might have index terms that are being hit by other people making queries come forward just slightly for a brief period of time. Anyhow, I'm almost out of power, so I turned off my camera, and I might have to poof in a minute or two.
Frode, can't hear you.
Just show you something really quickly before you go. I think you know this. So I took that paper, it's in the library here now, automatically added because they had a DOI, so we have the metadata. So there it is. Anyway, opened it. And this is about reading. And to me, I don't like sans serif to read. That is my personal preference. So that's why I have this command in Reader. So now it's turned it into break on every comma and or to make it more readable for my personal preference. My point of it is that, yes, absolutely, we should make opportunities for reading XR much more interactive for the view that people want. Alan, your hand up.
Yeah, thanks. So Adam, going back to that and looping that up back into the hypothesis as either a separate one or the same. I love that angle, and we've talked about this some. I mean, this is the kind of like I'm working on a different kind of writing, or some ideas of a different kind of writing that really fall into this sort of thing. And the nounification is one example of where the way that we are trained to write and read is sort of falling apart in this new environment. We scan far more often than we read, and we perhaps even sort of like capture more often than we read, right? Capture meaning I've grokked some part of it, but as long as I know I can access it in a later spot, I kind of maybe know where it's at. So even if the experiment were along the lines of, you know, first I was thinking like paths through documents, doesn't have to be that. It could be one document or two, where there are a variety of ways to interact, summarize, kind of work through the paper. But I'll give you an example. Like when we have AI summaries right now, it's usually at the document level, and that's not very satisfactory to me. It doesn't help me at all find if I've broken my train of thought, 12 times in a single document. What would be more useful is to have an AI detect when I have an inflection point in whatever I'm writing, whether I need to help it, whether I can help it with like some notation, or it's just a whatever. Doing the same kind of thing in a variety of documents. Okay, hold on, where am I going with this? To summarize is one type, but to also be able to say, hey, these little quotes from these three documents, to me, they seem very similar. I want to bind them. And so it's not like writing, but if you could perform these kind of operations on the small corpus that's available to say, like, these things are similar. I don't know. I'm just putting that out there. I don't want to overdo anything, because there's some of that stuff requires AI, and I'm not talking, we're obviously not focused on that part, but I do love the not forcing people to read, but saying there's another way that you can comprehend that is what we today call reading, but it may actually be another kind of exercise.
Yes, that's what I do all the time. That is, the information murals that you've all seen consist of anywhere from 150 to 400 little chunks of information. Where did I get them? Did I make them up, or did I extract them from some other document? Well, both. I extracted them from the other document, and then I refined them a little bit. That's the process of thinking through and making new patterns of approaches to problems that we have. So there's something important in I call it information chunking, but You can other people call it snippets, and other people call it lots of other things. I'm finished.
Yeah,
So-
that synthesis is something that so many people talking about LLMs today, the large language models and the sort of the so-called AI, are a little bit insensitive to the quality of the synthesizing work that they are doing, because they're often okay, very, very frequently okay, and sometimes dead wrong, and it can be very difficult to tell the difference between those two task performances. But yeah, that synthesizing and being able to make it render that easier as a process would be a really interesting thing. So, you know, the idea of, if not necessarily in the sense of literally expecting to compose a mural of your kind, Bob, but at least like the job of understanding what to synthesize and where and how to situate it could be a sort of a reasonable goal for a tool like this, or for a workspace.
And one of the things I puzzle about, I'm not, you know, I don't think we need to discuss it now, but sometime maybe, when these little chunks of information, 1 to 7 sentences, let's say, or a diagram or a table, is that an addressable unit? Is that a PDF, as we're talking, a document as we're talking about? Is that something that has metadata? What size is something that is going to have metadata on it? For me, I'd certainly like to have, if I'm going to put my climate change mural with several hundred chunks of information, with my sustainability mural with another 800 chunks of information, I would like to have some of those addressable, I think, some of those chunks.
Well, funnily enough, you sort of do, because we extracted some and we can play around with that. It's way back. I took Text Sniper and took all the text out of one of those diagrams, and I have it in a tinbox file, so I can pretty much chop and change the text. But I take your point. The reason I mention it is that all these things sort of link, because what Alan was just mentioning, it's sort of something I'm just starting to do. Well, actually, hopefully after Christmas, when comments get into Minter, which is a 2D, it's a broadly a comment system, but we're quite interested in basically using text and doing annotation and having live transcription. And there's that just because we're looking at in 2D doesn't really mean that the idea doesn't flow across to an XR space, where it is exactly this thing. You want to make a very deliberate synthesis. So, as Brandon's rightly pointed out, not some enormous machine-driven thing, but something that is so precise that the large-scale thing is never going to spot that association, because it's novel, if nothing else. So I think that's really important. Another thing I've just started to do is I dragged this back out, the Keith Houston book, which is nice because it actually marks up, it names all the parts of the books. Sorry, Bob.
What is it?
It's called The Book. And it's by a guy called Keith Houston, and it's a really nice history of the book. But he does. But I was just thinking about it. So I know I'm one who tends to write about the sort of the cold dead hand of print. But I have been thinking about, okay, so what of those affordances are useful or not? So one thing is to actually go back into there and look at not just sort of books, but things like academic documents. So running headers and footers, necessary? Probably not. Because that's like a page turning affordance. But what of this thing that is our norm is worth holding on to in the digital space? If we say, right, we are letting go of the printed form, so what do we hold on to that we might throw away by accident because we thought it, for instance, if it wasn't in the main flow of the text, you might say, right, don't need that. And I'm not sure that's necessarily true, but to do that, so one of the things is to actually have a naming of the parts, go through and say, what does this actually do and why was it here? And some of it we don't need, and some of it we do, and we may find sort of new things that we actually need to put in for the new sort of domain that we don't need on the paper, because in the sense it's an automatic affordance that we hadn't noticed what we just have. So that's one of the sort of side sort of jobs I've taken on at the moment. Over.
So on that, it's nice things are converging. Our remit is primarily it is academic documents. It's not other types of data or documents. However, there's absolutely no reason that a super high virtual PDF couldn't contain an entire mural on one page. So addressability is really, really important for many, many reasons. It is important for what you're talking about. It's also important for if we're going to have a graph on page 12 that has XY menus, in the visual meta way of doing it, we need a way to indicate what that rectangle is. So if the user clicks on it, the metadata will then be live for that area. So I think addressability is absolutely key for interaction. You cannot interact with something you cannot address, absolutely. So I'm now wondering about something more radical for the sake of discussion now to ruffle everyone's feathers. How about if we redefine what we can do in the headset and what we can do on the computer, so that a lot of what Alan said in the beginning, for the sake of argument, we throw away and we make the headset more literally a view thing, where most of the actual work, annotations and all that stuff is done in traditional computing because we have the tools. I'm talking short term, I'm not talking forever here. So that, for instance, in your case, Bob, I could imagine in my own software reader, as an example, if someone has imported a mural on page whatever, we somehow build a way for you to draw a box around it in the reader software and then say what it is. So you don't have to build a whole authoring system because that's just way too much, right? But you can already make a pretty good PDF with other software. So we just build the mechanism through which this can be done. And what is exciting to me about metadata that is not just citation metadata, by citation metadata, I mean author, title, and date. When we start talking about metadata in the document, and if we have it in something like the list command, meaning small and agile, that means that, for instance, as in your example, Bob, you can have a lot of things defined in this, and it is part of the metadata, meaning that when you put your headset on, all of that is there. The fact that the PDF isn't there yet doesn't mean you can't interact with it. So if you're reading a specific thing or viewing a specific thing, you still have access to all the names, all the places, all the data, all the numbers, everything in all your documents, even though they may not be there rendered quite yet.
You will require this if your definition of academic documents includes documents in the biology world.
Haven't thought of that. That's a really good point, Bob. I do think that the traditional kind of demo thing of here's a molecule, oh, it happens to be 3D, suddenly now becomes useful. And this is where a lot of the experience that Brandel has with different kinds of 3D XR things. How do you embed that in a PDF?
Yeah.
Because, or how do you extract it? How can you even just go through? I mean, we can imagine very soon in a 2D environment running some AI stuff on traditional documents and say, this looks like a certain molecule. Would you like me to embed the 3D version of it? So you can just click yes, yes, no, yes, 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 go through the document. So there are many ways to augment them. And we need to experiment with that. And that is why I'm so eager to get some kind of metadata transport mechanism defined. So when we start in January, we don't spend any time on that. Of course, we will, but any day we talk about transporting it, we're losing talking about interactions.
One of the fundamental experiences in this case for me was at a conference when a biologist got on the stage and you remember overhead transparencies? The overhead transparency machine broke and she could not give her talk because it depended so much on the diagrams that she was going to present. Just talking about just texting out of the mouth, puffs of air text would be totally inadequate, just non-communicative. at all. So she left.
Right. Mark, are you okay if I respond to that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah.
It's really one of the most wonderful things about this community. A lot of things come up that seem to contradict, but then they don't. Because I'm thinking, so Alan, often when he's with us, no, let me sketch this out, right? So I am now proposing we kind of, just for the sake of this 5 minutes, have the headset as a view-only mechanism. However, there's no reason why there cannot be a separate mechanism in the XR software for moving stuff about, even writing notes or whatever. It doesn't necessarily have to interfere with the library on my computer. But I can imagine that you do all kinds of stuff. It's in that environment, and we don't, ideally, of course, we'd find a way to put it on the computer, but maybe that can wait so that Alan can do his crazy sketches in VR, 3D, whatever he wants, and it's still quite basic. Mark.
Yeah, no, I thought it was interesting when you were talking about sort of things you can do with documents now. I mean, one of the projects involved in is working with chemical informatics. They're people who are sort of computing molecule structures and things. So tons of data. And in fact, they're finding that their traditional form of saying it's in the paper is rubbish, because the one thing that you need is not in the paper that gets published. So all the information you need. And so people are beginning to talk about, the things like Jupyter Notebook or Quarto, or there are various systems where effectively you're having documents that which actually speak to an underlying data set. Now that's really fun to me in the XR space, because you can sort of now turn it up to 11, because you're not stuck in the 2D graph. You can potentially do a lot more, because if the thing that is the document that you have is actually able to talk to the data set underneath, I think that begins to get very exciting, and that's another good reason. When people are saying, well, what's the point? Okay, well, you're not going to go and sit and read a book in this, maybe, not for work, but you might definitely want to go and interact with a document that actually has much more power of interaction than you can necessarily do on the 2D screen.
So in terms of these units that Alan went through earlier, what these things are, in terms of thinking about the metadata for the specific environment, of course, it would be really nice if we can get to the point where the description of all of that can be saved into a document. So you could imagine you're actually in an XR environment, you're reading something, and there's like a Harry Potter picture that looks 3D. You tap on it or whatever, and your entire library is reoriented to fit that, like a saved view spec, but for a room, right?
Yeah.
But first,
So, I mean, I think back to Bob's question about what are things and what possess metadata. It seems likely that if it's academic writing, if it's papers, that a pretty fundamental unit of measure is going to be the PDF in which they were supplied, and it's probably fairly important for that to be bound back as the source of truth. But I think that that's necessary but not sufficient for the indexing of the kind that we want to be able to have here. We need to be able to characterize components of it. The immutability of it works in our favor in that regard, because it means that a specific sort of effectively geospatial location inside a PDF is consistent to a specific sort of character string or image, and so that's a downside, but to the benefit of our ability to be able to kind of to extract a specific set of pixels if absolutely necessary, and then if we want to do some machine vision on it, do it if necessary to get what the text is, or if the text is immediately extractable by being aware of it in the context of it, is sort of down to the device doing the processing for it. But yeah, we will need to do both. But I think that first and foremost, like what you're talking about is having sort of first class per paragraph metadata. I think that those things would be necessary to encode, but would be necessary also probably to subordinate to a per file level. I just wanted to get back to that.
Excellent. Great point.
I would the thing about what's included or not. So the two questions for you guys. One of the fun things could be YouTube is known to have videos. So let's say that if there's a link in the document that goes to YouTube, You should be able to pull it off and it plays as a video in the corner, right? That's neat. It's actually useful. And then there are many other ways where we can refer to external stuff. You don't have to include a 3D molecule of hemoglobin. If you just have a way to refer to it, that should be enough. But you need an interaction to take it from the document and put it where you want to. But then before we stop now, I at least want a suggestion from each one of you, whoever wants to say, how are we going to get this metadata stuff from the quote-unquote computer to the headset? Just suggest something now, completely literal.
From the computer to the headset?
Yes. A long list of metadata of whatever stuff. What's the way you think it should go?
From the
I don't know.
metaphorical window to the metaphorical wall. Okay. Adam, you got something?
If I would do it myself in the same scope, I would. Do you mean the technical thing of getting a list from it? I would probably have the library at a work computer, if it's a personal library. I would make that work computer have some software that extracts information from the documents and make a list of it. Store those lists, and I would stream them over a WebSocket to the headset, just to make sure to get around some of the problems of having a web server running locally, because there are lots of permission problems there. So I would rather stream them over a WebSocket, and that opens some other things that you can do, remote connections in very interesting ways. Right now I have a web server on my laptop that serves things to the headset, and I get the PDFs in there, but you can't basically do anything, and it's my headset is not that pleasant for reading, but you can do things, and you can flip pages. That is what you can do right now, and extract images.
So this
So,
is a
but
follow-up
that
question
is,
when you're done.
Yep. But having a WebSocket, that is one of the technologies that basically a pipe. You don't know where that pipe leads. The software doesn't need to know that. It only knows that here is a source of information. I can send or receive information over this pipe. Where that pipe leads is a matter of choice, but it's an abstraction that I really like.
So let me just ask you follow-up questions then. So if we follow that example way of doing it, in my representing an average software developer, I would need to tell my programmers to take whatever structure we have and convert it to that socket. And the way that socket knows about each other on the computer or the headset, of course, the headset is a computer too, is how? What mechanism do you use for that?
You connect two devices to each other by this socket connection. You use a library like Socket.io, which does the brokering of making an HTTP connection, upgrading it to HTTPS, and then upgrading it to a WebSocket synchronous connection. Then you have the ability to send ASCII or Unicode or raw byte data down that pipe, and you're sort of it's your liberty to interpret it in any way you like on either side. So the main sort of action of it is just to make sure that you have this intermediating system whereby anytime you're interpreting some kind of user command or data, you make sure that there's this intermediate sort of message format that's appropriate to be able to flow through a socket. That way you can connect arbitrarily a series of clients and servers and make sure that they're able to synchronize with each other by virtue of having this common message format. So all you need to do is to make sure that you have that intermediating thing. And it's similar to like I was saying with the Quake server. And then it works.
Yeah, but there was also the step of how do the headset and the laptop or whatever get to know about each other. You need some sort of either a secret URL or a place where to go, or a way of logging in somewhere to get that, to open that pipe, that connection between them. It could also be a secret code that you share, that you enter into your temporary code that opens the connection. And there are ways of doing that for the user, so you get your own documents only and no one else, and it's a secure connection. So that there is some plumbing to do to create those pipes, but I think it could be quite streamlined.
Just to
I
throw
think
it
one other connection for that might be just that you sorry, Alan, I quickly, before the thought goes, is that you could have, basically, now we have the Internet of Things, if you've got some sort of smart device also, because anything to us, I mean, I know this, that moves the trust problem elsewhere, but effectively, if the headset is aware, or your system, the other part is aware of the headset, then that could be the bridging part. In other words, you haven't got to do anything. That it's just the fact that they're co-located might be a possibility. Sorry, Alan.
Oh, no, nothing. To just throw a totally different angle, not one that I necessarily agree with, but and this is actually a genuine question. With Oculus, I got to download a game, and I assume then by downloading it's stored somewhere in the headset. Is that if we were taking the narrow approach of, like picking out a couple of documents that we were going to gussy up, would it make sense to essentially treat it like a game in that way, of like download it to your device and drop it as needed, or is this I'm not.
You want me to?
Yeah,
that?
Like thoughts on. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, so a game is both the data and the program that you're running it in. So that would be like having the browser and some kind of cache of stuff on it. You could do that. It would also though then depend on whether you have the ability or the obligation to write your own WebXR kind of rendering system. If you're doing it native in that sense, and at some level you're obliged to do it natively. What you ship natively could be just like, oh, run a web view, but you're sort of there. So it's possible that Elio with Softspace is actually running something that's web-based, or he could be using Unity or some other system. So you can do it that way. One of the questions is, depending on the platform, what scope of ability and obligation you have to be able to kind of make use of the displays and things. For example, on Vision Pro is like an iPad. On iPad, you're not allowed to ship your own browser. You can skin WebKit, and so people ship Chrome and they ship Firefox, but they're still fundamentally WebKit. And so, there are sort of techno-political implications to what are sort of appropriate and available kind of avenues.
Right. I mean, we obviously our main product has to be WebXR because that's what we got funding to do. So whether we package this as an app, as you talked about, or other is an important question. In the terms of if we go through with this particular way of doing it, there shouldn't be any reason why in the future we can't take that connection stream and not have it be local. As long as it's abstracted on both ends, if some multi-user or server environment should be used in the future, that should be okay, right? Yes.
Modulo the quality of that intermediation of the kind that Adam and I are talking about in terms of making use of a socket or some other system that has the ability to be able to kind of push those things back and forth. And what we're talking about is not local. It may not actually qualify as local for some people's definition of it, because what I suggest and what Adam has probably running on his laptop is local only in the sense of being on his local network, but still a networked sort of apparatus where he's making use of his Mac for being the server and the headset for being the client. Whereas many people would think of local as meaning only hitting the local file system and having all of the sort of the ability to be on both sides of that inside the single runtime. What we're proposing is not that, and so it's immediately much easier to be able to grow. But there may be some pitfalls where people need to be aware of the fact that these things are supposed to be able to execute over to some degree of remove. For the most part, when you build things with browsers, then they are internet ready for fairly obvious reasons.
Okay, so I think this is all very exciting, and yeah, Bob. Can't hear you. Oh, you're leaving. Okay, see you later, Bob.
Hey, Bob. Thank you for joining.
If we follow this approach, what I think we should do first of all is get my software reader to talk to Adam's whatever he's doing in a WebXR, whatever test environment he wants. And we should do that by all of us contributing to, in very loose sense, making a spec. In whatever way we want to write it. We define a few core things that just has to be there. And then we define how to grow it. It's probably similar to how we did Visual Meta, just a bit more rigorous. And then because of what Alan keeps saying, we got to keep it flexible because we just don't know what it should be in the future. So it has to be kind of discoverable what is there.
Sorry to jump in, but one of the absolute bare bones simplest things to do would be to take a look at my various sneaky paste view of author and actually make it so that author is able to spit that socket data out directly, so that you could connect author rather than my 2D web page and my VR web page. You can connect author directly to that VR web page such that it has the ability of being able to send that stuff through. That would be, fast, hopefully, relatively readable in terms of being able to understand what it is that I'm sending through that socket. All of that page is plain text. There's no view source. You don't need to have access to the repo. It's literally just what it is. But from there, you could start to expand it and get going pretty quickly.
So there are some issues from my side of author versus reader, plus this is supposed to be the reading year. So what you're basically saying is JSON is cool, because that's what author uses. That's part of what you're saying, right?
JSON happens to be cool, I guess I would say.
Okay.
I would say that what I'm sending is not JSON per se. Well, it might be actually, just incidentally, because it's JavaScript. But what I'm saying is sending a very basic set of node and positional data of the kind that author has the ability to compose at this point is a pretty easy goal to meet as a very immediate sort of thing of like a basic proof positive of like I can get a socket up and I can send stuff.
Brandel, easy for you. There are years of assumptions underlying the easy word there. So, okay.
No, I freely admit that it's not trivial. What I mean is that it's an atomic validation of a set of the techniques that we are sort of largely agreeing upon as being necessary prerequisites for a more sophisticated job. So I'm not saying that any dumbass can do it. I'm saying that they are good, clean, hard-edged, and relatively simple in terms of the scope, sort of building blocks and steps to be able to go like once you have that, then you can pull it all off. Yeah.
Mark, don't go quite yet.
Thank you.
Mark, one more minute. One more minute. 45 seconds. 45 seconds. Okay. So guys, can we set a time for us here and whoever else in the group wants to get together to define the whatever thing that is sent across, whether it's JSON or whatever, just spend an hour and and then we test it. And if it turns out that it's rubbish, we do something else. But the day somebody can send something to Adam and anybody else can use Adam's system, we're light years ahead. And then we can start experimenting.
We've got Fabien's, we've got Brandel's, we've got Adam's. I mean, we got like 3 versions of this, right? So like we're kind of already there, right?
Yeah, but we start with one because Adam is being very, very simple. I think they're being a bit more sophisticated, but just randomly, because if it turns out that Adams, it just doesn't work for us, fine, we do something else, but we gotta try something. Is that cool, guys?
Well, I'd get back to my suggestion of effectively a sort of like a minimum viable product concept. So you just have a wrapper you send through. Stop worrying about what's inside and what it used to be before it got in the wrapper. Have a wrapper that we can send across the this notional divide.
Well, we've got to have
and in a sense, in that seems to be the start point, because you're in effect building it's a bit like you're building the TCP/IP to go through that bit. You've decided this is the thing you're going to interchange. What you stick into it is just going to be data broadly.
Well,
so in other words, it's another form of structured data.
Mark, we still have to define that data, no matter how simple or not simple it is. Right?
But Frode, one kind of data we already know, we're going to send PDFs, for example, over this pipe. Or we could do that, at least. So just sending over a file list and the client picks a file and you send that file to is one way of trying that connection that I would find useful. That means...
Bye-bye. Thanks, Mark. Okay, well, Adam, why don't we just do that then? You tell me what you want Reader to be able to do to send you PDF. I'll try to add the feature in the Reader library where you control-click on a file and it says send to Adam's headset now magically. Boom. Just that simple. Might just start us experimenting with things and finding out things.
Well, send to Adam's headset. You're turning the what I'm proposing here, or what I think Brandel was proposing, is that you get your programmers to establish a WebSocket, some sort of WebSocket, to try to send some data out to perhaps one of his earlier examples.
Yeah, mine is a technical proof, not a point of view on what is an appropriate form of interchange. It's just that what I have in the author view right now is something that happens to work based on some data that your stuff creates. And so my suggestion is, as a very first exercise, to just follow exactly that contract and have it sent directly from that application, rather than from a web page that I make that consumes the data from that application. So to remove those steps and make sure that your programmers have the ability to get a socket up and send data of that kind in such a way as to be able to evaluate it on the other side. That's all. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. I have more availability with my Reader software guys than the author software guys, although that may change.
Right.
But however, in principle, yeah, I completely agree with you. But
how about what we do is we write out these approaches just as a diagram, like just as not even a visual diagram, just like I'm not clear on the structural differences, not the technical implementation, but the structural differences being proposed between the three different models so far. So maybe if we just saw those, we don't have to decide on anything because we know it can be done. I mean, it's basic, right? This is very simple stuff to do, but I guess, yeah, I'll throw that out as a request, because then we can at least add it into some kind of documentation. This is the approach we're taking.
Yeah. My suggestion is purely pragmatic from the perspective of developing the muscle memory, the reflex of being able to set one of these things up with no expectation of retaining it at all. You know, unfortunately, my view of as an engineer and as a programmer is, you're going to throw just about everything away. The only thing you get to keep is that you know how to do it. So totally. From the perspective of, if you have the people who are doing this stuff, you might as well do the thing that I'm suggesting, so that they know how to do the thing that we mean to do at such time as we figure out what we want.
Yes,
if that makes sense.
But not from author Reader. My programmer
Sure.
with author is just not available these days. Okay, so
okay, that's the stress. Okay,
that is one step. So here's the final thing for today. Two requests. Number one, do you guys want to meet before next Tuesday for half an hour or an hour just to go through what this is? And secondly, would Brandel like to write down what he just said in a way that my programmer, who is not brilliant, could understand. And related to that, Adam.
Recording this.
Yeah, we are. No, he's learning, so it's not an insult. He's not. He's doing this just. I don't even know he speaks English, considering our dialogue sometimes. Anyway, he
Better
would
double down. That's great.
he would not be watching this recording. It's not his interest, and I'm very grateful for what he produces. But it takes a lot of testing back and forth. But also similarly, Adam, could you make something to receive this? Following, okay, hang on, I'm talking rubbish. Brandel already has this thing where in Chrome, doesn't work on Safari, I take an author document, pull it into something which he has. And that then is available in all of the views of this. It's a, what's the system called again, Brandel, the host for it?
WebSocket, or it's in Glitch, but it's
Glitch.
powered through
Okay.
Socket.io.
Socket.io is the common denominator.
Yeah. So Brandel and Adam, can you help make this happen?
I can answer questions, and I can try to characterize the approach. Yeah, like I said, like the.
Sorry, Brandel, I have to jump, but I just want to say this was a great session. I thought that like a lot of good came out of it, but it's nowhere close to like finalized. We didn't just like finish defining all the anatomy of this project, right? We just started it, right? So I think it's really important to go through, clean up some of what was discussed, flesh it out more, try and come up from there. We've already gotten some ideas of like, we're either going to go this way or we're going to go that way. Those things I think are really important to figure out sooner than later.
Yes.
So I'm just going to put that out.
Alan, I agree with you. And that is why I'm doing it this way, because we need to fail early and quickly. So we need to work on the structures, but we also need to do a technical thing just to learn and then throw it away if we have to.
So Frode, another, if you really want to do a very basic thing, if you have a folder with your library right now in Reader, if you just dump some sort of library file, a list, a JSON list in the same folder, we could run a one-line terminal command to serve that folder directly to the headset. So there are ways of trying this out that requires a lot less.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Let's do that, and then we realize little things, and then we firm up something, over the next month or two. So, Alan, I'm not trying to ignore what you're saying. It's quite the opposite. I agree. We need to think these things through. While we do that, let's build a house and knock it down and build it up again. Fail often, technically. So, Adam, if you can send me an email about that. Even if it's just a paragraph, I'll put it up on Jira for my coders, see if they can actually do it.
All right, how about this? We do all that, but top priority, top action. I'm being your product manager now. Talk to Dene. Let's get Slack set up. Let's move asynchronously to Slack this week. We could still do Zoom calls like this, but if we're going to actually make progress, we need to be in a thing that we can talk on throughout, right? So let's get that set up. I can help, but just, tell me, like, let's get on Slack this week.
I just sent an email to her asking that. Yeah, I'm very happy with that. Okay, are we saying on Tuesday then? That's going to be enough, right? If we do a little bit of email, these guys should be available to do some basic testing.
Hard to say on my part because it's holidays, right? So
yeah, so day after Christmas.
Okay. I gotta go. See you.
Thank you. And the rest of us, we're okay with Tuesday, and we're okay trying this basic approach. I think it's both absurd and also very, very exciting that these basic things don't exist. It kind of reminds us how early we are. We're spending time arguing how to get metadata and a document into an XR headset. Come on. that's go down in the
It's
pioneer
mostly Frode. It's mostly you arguing. I'm just nodding. I don't think it is that of a hard problem. Of course, doing it robustly is hard, and doing it as a very nice product is hard. But kind of what we do, that is what programming is. It is sending data back and forth all the time. So even at kind of my level, it is what and I'm not like a full-time.
Adam, with your pragmatic attitude and getting it done attitude, that is why I'm leaning towards you. Fabien is brilliant, but he's very concerned about, you know, the open source and the openness and a lot of politics, and that's absolutely brilliant. But in the beginning, I just want to do it the Adam way, whatever in the world that is. So,
but I don't want to be in the center and direct things, because there are many chefs in this.
No, but Adam, this is what's so important. We got to build and rebuild, because one thing I really learned early on with the whole text interaction stuff is until we try something, we just don't know. And this is why, with respect, we're annoyed at Peter because he hasn't put a headset on yet. He's done it many years ago. It's like, Peter, it's hard for you to be part of the dialogue if you haven't put the headset on. It's the same with the basic act of where documents are. If it turns out that Adam's super simple solution is good enough for this entire year, wonderful. If it turns out it shows us we're completely wrong, wonderful. We've just got to build stuff, right? So you're the center for now, but that's not a bad thing. No one's going to blame you if we change it.
Well, it's not my it's not my solution. A large part of the web is running on those sockets and or on simple web service as well.
Well, you're and explaining it, and it's a real thing. Just
remember, and I think Brandel has suggested it many times that we could do it this way, sockets, for example, and I've been following his footsteps in some of the projects. But the cool things about sockets is that it's more peer-to-peer. That's very interesting, and it also allows us for further expansion where we could do several people stream from people to people to that you could invite me to your room and I visit it, to visit your library for a moment. Maybe everything is stored on your computer, but I'm a guest for a moment, watching your workspace for a moment, so you could invite us. So that it opens up for this.
That is super. It's just super exciting looking at it this way, because why in the world should we ignore laptops and computers that are essentially supercomputers now? Of course we can use them, right? You know, at some point, 20 years in the future, you have a headset, nothing else. That's fine. Yeah, I mean, I remember the very first time I met Vint Cerf, we actually had breakfast. And I just said, you know, it's amazing, Vint, with TCP/IP, basically you've allowed, because that was the time when people talking about superhighway, information superhighway. I said, Vint, that's not what you invented. You invented the opportunity for anybody to create a highway when they want one. That's exactly what you're talking about. You know, this is wonderful stuff.
Yeah, and it's interesting that we could meet in a virtual world hosted by hosted by the phone or the laptop, and we could meet for a moment in a very in a fantastic 3D world that would have been science fiction 20 years ago, and it's mind-blowing. So it's doable now.
Brandel, is it public knowledge whether the Vision Pro will allow for multiple software to run at the same time, so that, for instance, we could all meet in our space but continue a dialogue audio using other software? No, you're muted.
No, muted.
Which is very funny considering what I asked you.
You have the ability to use multiple apps. Yeah, that's in the keynote demos and stuff like that. You've got Mail, and you've got Safari, and you've got Messages and stuff like that. So
we could be in a WebXR environment and run, if Zoom implements something, and I'm sure they will.
WebXR is an exclusive capability.
Oh, okay. But we could still use our
Same as-
phones and our computer or whatever for the audio chat part of it. So we don't need to build that to fulfill the dream of a multi-user experience within our environment anyway.
Yeah, what WebXR
Yeah.
just means is there's the what it's implementing is called the WebXR immersive virtual reality API, and so that means that it takes over exclusive sort of display of your stuff, but you know you're at liberty you're at liberty to do what you want with that space. So you can put whatever you want in it, but it just means that you're on the hook for it. And there's not other stuff in view at that time.
Is there any public information about the WebRTC, if the whole package, the status of that?
If anything like that isn't working, then it's a bug.
Okay.
You know, WebKit is you know, in general, a good faith. Like what we do with web standards is we advocate for our position, and then we implement according to the consensus.
Yeah, as it works on all devices, or even the small phones and iPads, so very well. So I just wonder if so if we would have something WebRTC, that would most of it would probably work. Then I could probably check in the simulator myself. Come to think of it.
Yeah, in general, the simulator is a pretty good proxy. I mean, some of the things that the simulator doesn't do is it doesn't have hand stuff. We amended the WebXR specification to allow for an input type that's, you know, public record. We've got it out there. So it's actually added and amended to the specification. So this idea of a transient pointer that will be more appropriate to what sort of works in simulator. It wasn't for simulator, but it has the sort of the full-on benefit of being able to get more useful stuff out of simulator.
Yep.
But yeah.
Oh, nice. Good.
So in 2 weeks, second week of January, I'll be visiting Rob in California. I'll be in California twice because I have to go up to Washington for Dene's team, of course. So I'm wondering, obviously, Brandel, I hope and expect to see you. And Adam, you have two choices. Either you fly out or we meet on Zoom. It could be fun. But should we make it a kind of a deadline that we try to have a means through which to make the basic test work by then? So that when I sit down with Brandel and he puts on his headset, which I cannot use, he can say, oh yeah, I can see this thing.
Yeah, I mean, so the WebSocket bare bones infrastructural work that Adam and I are proposing here should take hours, not days of work. I would expect an experienced programmer to get it up in 30 minutes, but you know, 2 to 3 hours would be fine. It's really not. It's not a lot because it doesn't have to be sophisticated. It's just a proof positive that you can get it running out of your application and connect to some sort of willing and open server. Yeah, and you can use Glitch. You could use mine, but I have a free one, so anything you set up that you have dominion over is going to be appropriate and should be something that even Fabien would be able to tolerate in terms of what it's for.
Okay.
And how it works.
Right. So what are the action items now as far as you guys see it? We'll meet on Tuesday, right?
Yeah, I will try to make it. It's the Swedish holidays are quite long and intense, especially in a family
You're saying
setting
Tuesday
here.
the 2nd?
No. Tuesday next week.
Oh, Tuesday 26th, Boxing Day. Okay. Yeah, I can do that.
Okay, cool. So I'll send in an email to the team and tell them. So that day we will just look at how to get stuff from one place to another, right? Just try to make something like this happen. Okay. Can you both or either send me a paragraph that I forward to my programmer to say, please prepare reader for this, because they're going to need a little bit more Mac specific rather than WebSocket. Like maybe suggesting a library or a method or, really spoon feed them. because I have a good programmer, but he's very inexperienced. He's essentially learning by doing Reader. That's why he's working on Reader, not Author.
To be honest, I think I would do the same thing as he would do. Google for it to see if what are the
Yeah, I
built-in
don't-
capabilities of the web view. Do I need anything special? Do I need a library for it? I would browse around and then. My suggestion would be straight out of Google and and the tutorial sites, because I haven't touched that part of Mac programming or app programming.
Yeah, me neither.
Native.
You know, that's why I am where I am, is that I work on and through the web. But yeah, like there are some things like WebSockets, but it would, you know, one, depend on the person's proficiency. I wouldn't even necessarily know that you go through a web view per se. You may be able to throw things down a WebSocket without having to route it through a WK web view. But I've literally never written WK web view except in the keynote presentation, so I don't code in that way.
Okay, that's cool. I will see what he gives me, and I'll see you guys, if you can, right after Christmas. I'll send an email now. Slack is being set up. And Adam, you were going to say something else or not?
Nope.
Okay, have a good week, everyone, and merry all kinds of things. Bye for now. Thank you, thank you, thank you.